All right, now our keynote speaker, I guess you could say. We actually have two guest speakers. As I mentioned, Al Grajeda is going to be doing a dog demonstration from Livermore Police Department. But first we've got Mike Dowling, who's going to come up in just a moment. Mike is a Marine Corps and Iraq War veteran who was born and raised here in the San Francisco Bay Area. He served in the Marines from 2001 to 2011 and as the honor graduate of his police class, military police class. During his service, Mike became a handler of a military dog, a working dog named Rex. Together, Mike and Rex served with the 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marines in Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2004, and they were part of the first group of Marine Corps canine units to operate on the front lines of combat since the Vietnam War. For their actions, they were awarded a Navy Achievement Medal. Mike's critically acclaimed book titled Sergeant Rex, and you can see the book there on the left, The Unbreakable Bond Between a Marine and His Military Working Dog, is a memoir of his time serving with Rex in the Marines. He has advocated for military dogs and shared his story at venues across the country, including the Pritzker Military Library, Chicago, Marines Club, San Francisco, and he was a TEDx speaker at Napa Valley. He has consulted on various productions about military working dogs, including the popular CBS show NCIS, Glory Hounds on Animal Planet, and the documentary Always Faithful by Academy Award-winning team James Mall and Harris Dunn. A consummate advocate for military dogs and the veteran community, he now serves on the advisory board for Wings for Warriors, Hounds and Heroes, and is the co-founder of the nonprofit Veterans in Film and Television. Let's give a warm welcome from Las Positas College to Mike Dowling.
Thanks, Jim.
It's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. It's really an honor. Thanks to Todd and the entire staff with the Veterans Resource Center here on campus. My good friend Hector Rodriguez, who you just heard from, I've known Hector since 5th grade, and believe it or not, he's been the same size ever since 5th grade. But I appreciate the invite, Hector. And it was really interesting actually learning about your career in the Navy. I mean, I knew he was in the Navy, but I didn't know exactly the details of what he did. And that, as a veteran, I find that most interesting, learning about other veterans' experiences and what they did in the military. But I can't express enough how impressed I am with everyone involved in Las Positas. I took a tour of the campus yesterday. I saw the displays of honoring veterans, all the quotes and facts lined up along the lawns here and the walkways, and of course the American flags and everything that's out here today. And the fact that this is an all-day event, they really go the extra mile in bringing awareness and honor to the veteran community. And as a veteran, I just can't express enough how much I appreciate that. It's really great. So a round of applause to Todd and the veteran staff here. I think you guys are doing a great job. So I was born in Berkeley, raised in Richmond, right here in the East Bay. And I'm the author of a book called Sergeant Rex. Rex's nicknames were Sexy Rexy and Tyrannosaurus Rex, depending on his attitude each day. But the primary reason of why I wrote the book is because I felt the best way of honoring Rex was to share his story. If you ever talk to a veteran, I know the retired colonel said, look veteran in the eye and thank them for their service. I would take that actually one step further, and if you have a couple minutes, maybe ask them a few questions about what their experience was like. Find out what they actually did in the service, because I think the best way to bridge the gap between the civilian community and the veteran community is for civilians to better understand the veteran culture and experience. And I think the best way to do that is to find out about their stories, learn about what they go through so that they can understand the values that they bring into their own communities back here. And so I would just encourage you all to do that. So for my book, I was hoping to not only just honor Rex, but also to share our stories so that people can read about the experience of a typical military working dog team in combat. Because when I became a military dog handler, I actually knew nothing about the military. I didn't even know the military used dogs when I enlisted in the Marine Corps. I enlisted in 2001. I was in boot camp when 9/11 happened. All those images that you saw, I didn't see any of it until December 2011 because I was in boot camp and they didn't show us any of that stuff. And to be honest with you, we were getting, because that happened in New York City. I was in San Diego at boot camp, so that's 3 hours ahead. We were just waking up to go to chow. and they formed us up outside our barracks, and instead of going to chow, they brought us back into the barracks, and they told us what was happening, and we thought that it was a joke. We thought that they were just trying to motivate us harder to train or trying to mess with our heads. You know what I mean? Like, we didn't believe it. But it became very real when the commanding officer stepped in and reported the news to us, because obviously he wouldn't lie to us or anything like that. So at that point, it became a really interesting experience from that point on. Anyways, I had no idea about the military working dog program. And it's funny because my entire life, my family used to foster and train guide dogs for the blind. There's an organization in San Rafael, California, called Guide Dogs for the Blind Foundation, and we fostered and trained and graduated several guide dogs for blind people. And if you've ever been to Richmond or Albany, that area out there, there's a wonderful dog park called Point Isabel, which is right on the water. And I literally grew up a mile away from Point Isabel. And I would take my dogs to that dog park, which, by the way, in my opinion, is the greatest dog park I've ever been to in my entire life. It sits right there on the San Francisco Bay Area. That was my hangout every single weekend. So I grew a lifelong affinity for the animal, the dog. And what's funny is I didn't even know about dogs in the military. I did not sign up to be a military dog handler. It was only after the fact that I became a military policeman that I found out that you can handle dogs. So before I get into any more detail about my own personal story, I want to educate you about the value of the military working dog program in the military in general. So starting in World War I, dogs were not officially used in the military, but a lot of military units adopted dogs as mascots for their units. The most famous of these mascots is a dog named Stubby. They call him Sergeant Stubby. Stubby went with his unit. He was part of Army's 102nd Infantry. He actually deployed into combat with their unit, and he found wounded troops on the battlefield, and he kept the morale up throughout those tough times. He was wounded actually several times. He was such a celebrity when he came back from his deployments that they paraded him with the troops when they came home in their victory parades, and he also got to go to the White House and meet presidents. That's how much they valued a dog as their mascot because of what he did for their unit. And his preserves are at the Smithsonian today, so you can actually go visit him and if you want to pay your respects. But World War II is when the military working dog program officially came into existence. And the way it happened was when Pearl Harbor happened, there was this great patriotism flowing across the country, and all the prominent dog breeders and dog trainers in the country felt that dogs can play a big role in helping the war effort. And they teamed up with the American Kennel Association, and they created an organization called Dogs for Defense. And they lobbied the U.S. military to try and tell them you should accept dogs and train them to officially go with your units to help protect your troops. And the U.S. military said, you know what, let's give it a shot. And the way they got their dogs was they went across the country and put up flyers and advertised for families to give up their dogs that they think would be good for the war effort. So I don't know if you have a dog now, you know, we all think our dog are usually the smartest dogs out there. Would you think that your dog would be worthy enough or smart enough to go serve in the U.S. military? I don't know. Well, back then, if you did, they would have their chance. Obviously, not all of them went into combat, but those that did actually performed extremely well. They performed so well that they were recognized with citations and awards. That monument on the right, bottom right, it's called the Always Faithful Monument. And it was thanks to Captain William Putney, who authored the Always Faithful book. He was the veterinarian in the Marine Corps that was the commanding officer of the 3rd War Dog Platoon in World War II. And they invaded Guam and performed all these missions. And when he went back to Guam years later, he saw the graves of the dogs that were killed in action. They were desecrated. They weren't maintained really well. So he built up an effort and created a monument that sits in Guam that honors all of those war dog teams or those war dogs that were killed in action. Those are the names inscribed on the monument. Those were some of the first dog teams ever to officially serve in combat, and they're all known as heroes, and that's how much we respect and honor our dog teams. So that's thanks to Captain William Putney. Korea, again, I'm not going to go into all the details, but if a quick history search will show you that there are many citations and awards that are given to war dog teams that served in Korea. They performed exemplary missions and operations, and just had a lot of valor in everything that they did. Next up was Vietnam. Vietnam, about 4,000 dogs, 4,000 deployed throughout the Vietnam War, and it's estimated that they saved a minimum of 10,000 lives, probably more than that. That's a conservative estimate. The thing about the Vietnam War dog teams, unfortunately, this is one of the saddest chapters actually in the U.S. military. The dogs in World War II in Korea, they got to come home, but the dogs that served in Vietnam did not. They were actually left in Vietnam and were not able to come home. I'm not going to get into the details about it, but it was just a tragic thing that should never have happened. And that's the only time that's happened in the U.S. military is when dogs were left behind. But I want to thank all the dog handlers that served in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, because they were out there, with the blood, sweat, and tears. They built a legacy of success for dog handlers to continue on today, and we proudly did carry on that legacy. So what kind of jobs did those dog teams do? Like, what did they actually do in combat? Well, they're sentry dog teams. And what sentry dog teams is, they're essentially base security. They do patrols around the bases and just maintain security there. The scout dog teams is what they're best known for. They walk point. They're on patrols with the infantry out there doing missions, and they're out in front of the squads. They're clearing the way. They can detect danger. The biggest value of the dogs is they can alert us to danger that we do not know is there, which is why they walk point, because they utilize their senses to tell us that. Tracking, obviously, if a bomb goes off or an ambush happened and the enemy scatters, they can use the dogs to trail them and track them down. Do we need a medical attention here? We okay? Okay. So moving on, we have mine detection dogs, and for obvious reasons, dogs can detect mines that are hidden there. And finally, there were water patrol dogs. Now, what water patrol dogs are used for, sometimes enemies would try and sneak across a river, a lake, or whatnot, a stream, and U.S. forces would be patrolling those waters in boats, and they would have a dog that can actually detect enemies underneath water. So that's what they were used for. In the post-Vietnam era, that's when they transitioned dogs, the training for dogs to operate in combat, for more of a garrison-type role, meaning they trained the dogs more to be utilized as military police here in the U.S. and at bases around the world. So because the dogs were such a success, when the wars were done, instead of just getting rid of the program, they maintained the program, but just kept the dogs as regular military policemen at U.S. installations around the world. So, again, why do we use dogs? Well, a dog interprets the world much through its nose, much how we do through our vision. We rely heavily on our eyesight and vision as a human being. Obviously, a dog relies heavily on their nose. The percentage of a dog's brain that is devoted to analyzing smells and odors is 40% larger than that of a human being's the part of a human being's brain in detecting odors and smells. They can detect odors up to 10,000 times better than we can. They can also detect odors that are up to 40 feet underground and capable of detecting odors up to 2 parts per trillion. Basically, their nose is such a gift to them and to us, because they can alert us to danger that could be miles away from us. So, and they became so successful in the Vietnam and Korean wars that it was found out bounties were put on the dog team's heads because they were so effective. Today, military dogs need to maintain a 98% or greater accuracy just to remain certified. What that means is every single month, there's whatever the dog is trained to detect, whether it's narcotics or explosives, They have to detect that odor so many times a month, and not just detect it, they have to accurately detect it. So a lot of times when you go train, sometimes the dog will give a false response. What that means is there's nothing there, but the dog will respond just because they want to get the reward. Well, that is not a good thing. You don't want your dog to do that. And if they do that so many times, then that's less than 98%. The dogs that the military uses today, think of it like this. For all the athletes that make it into the NFL, it's a very, very small percentage. Well, with the dogs, it's the exact same thing. They already start with the world's greatest, most intelligent and athletic dogs that are in existence. The military has a dedicated full-time team that goes around the world to test puppies from the greatest breeders around the world. And then out of those litters, they take what they feel are the most potential puppies and bring them back here to the US, which, by the way, we also have our own breeding program as well. Then when they come back here, they get fostered out for about a year, until they're about a year old, to local families, and then they come back to the base and start their military working dog boot camp. And I actually think this is the greatest job in the military. There are full-time military dog trainers. Their entire job is to train dogs for the military. And it's at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. That's where the headquarters is at. And all these dogs go through this training. And then even after through that training, not all of them make it. So you have all these amazing dogs from the most amazing breeders in the world with the most potential, and out of those, only the top 1% actually make it. The rest get adopted out to law enforcement agencies or to local families. We are dealing with the most intelligent and the most athletic dogs in the world. And the types of breeds that are most generally used are German Shepherds, which Rex was, and another breed called Belgian Malinois, or we call them Mals for short, or Maligators, because they're so aggressive. But Belgian Malinois, German Shepherds, Belgian Treverns, those are the three kind of breeds. They also use labs just for detection purposes. In the past, they've used Doberman Pinschers, they've used Rottweilers, but over years of testing and training, they found that German Shepherds and Belgian Malinois last the longest and are also display the most intelligence and athleticism. So that takes me to my story with Rex. Like I said, I grew up in the East Bay, Richmond, graduated from El Cerrito High School. I went to UC Santa Barbara for a couple years, but one of my best friends, and actually Logan, you might know him, his name is Daniel Peterson. He helped start up the Anti-Terrorism Battalion, was a sniper. He's still in the Marine Corps. He graduated with me to El Cerrito High School, and all he talked about was how much he loved being a Marine, and it just kind of got to me. Like when I was in college, he was stationed in San Diego and come visit me in Santa Barbara, and he was talking about all the fun that he was having as an infantryman in the Marine Corps, and I felt like I made the wrong decision. So I finally took that leap and left school, joined the Marine Corps. I went in on an open contract, which is the worst, dumbest thing you can possibly do. What that means is the military chooses your job for you. I'm not going to get into the details of how that happened, but it ended up being the biggest blessing in disguise, because they chose me to become a military policeman, and at military police schools when I found out about the K-9 program, and I did whatever it took to become a handler, which, by the way, it's extremely hard to become a dog handler in the military. Out of every military police class, there's about 60, 65 students. There's only 2 spots for dog handlers. And so I became the honor graduate just so I can so there would be no doubt that I could become a handler. Which, by the way, being a handler was probably the greatest experience of my life. I ended up getting stationed at Camp Pendleton, and I ended up getting assigned Rex. Now, the kennel master, who's in charge of each kennel, they have to determine which dog would partner with the best handler, because just like human beings, dogs have their own personalities as well. And you can't just have a great dog, and you can't just have a great handler. The handler and dog need to have this chemistry together to become a great dog team, because they can't operate on their own. We have this saying in the dog community, emotions run up and down leash. And what that means is the kind of energy that you bring to the table when you come into work, it's going to affect your dog. So if you have personal baggage going on or whatnot, well, you got to suck it up, and you got to come in motivated and happy to see your dog, because they're going to sense that. It's going to affect their training, and vice versa. If you come into work and your dog is not, you could tell that they're not motivated or that they're not feeling their best, you might not want to work them as hard, because it's just going to keep them out of the fight that much longer, and you don't want that. So a brief overview of our story. Grew up here, trained guide dogs, open contract, became a handler. By the way, Rex's serial number is Echo 168. If you ever come across a dog handler in the military and they tell you their dog's name, ask them what their serial number is, and I bet you they recite it with heartbeat. It's the same. It's the dog's version of their Social Security. It's how the military tracks each dog, because there's a million Rexes in the military, but that's his one and only number. Their serial number is tattooed in their ear. In 2004, General Mattis at the time was leading the effort in Iraq at the time, and IEDs, bombs, that was the biggest threat to troops and civilians. Well, it turns out, and I know this because I have a friend who was in the meeting, General Mattis was so frustrated about the IEDs and explosives going off that he declared, "Don't we have bomb dog teams? Like, where are they at?" And they said, "We do have them. However, dog teams have not been trained to operate in combat for years," which is true. We would just operate to train, as if we were patrolling cities back here in the States. I had never trained with the infantry. I had never done any kind of training simulation, in a forward deployment area. I did minimum time at a range around heavy weapons, and explosions. We were not ready. We didn't have the equipment. We didn't have the know-how, anything like that. General Mattis didn't care. He said, "I don't care. Why don't you take a dozen dog teams, get them out here, let's see how they do, and then we'll, see where we need to adjust." So I was one of those 12 dog teams that the Marine Corps chose with Rex. Out of those 12 teams, when we got to Iraq in March of 2004, I got attached to 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marines, and they operated in Mahmudi, Iraq, which was 30 minutes south of Baghdad, about 20 minutes east of Fallujah, in an area known as the Triangle of Death. And the reason why they called it that was because their area of operation was Mahmudia, Lusafia, and Ludafia. And these three cities, if you connect the dots, formed a triangle, and at that time had the highest concentration of violence in the Iraq War, and that's who Rex and I got attached to. We were the only dog team for the entire battalion, and I'm just going to share with you our very first mission. This is a ill-prepared dog team going out on the first mission, which was we did a middle-of-the-night raid. It turned out that they discovered a safe house out in the country in Mahmudia for insurgents. And this is literally after a week after I got attached to the unit. And so they wanted to go raid that safe house in the middle of the night and capture the insurgents that were hanging out there. And they asked me to come because after they raided the house, they wanted me to search the house as well as the surrounding area for weapons and caches and explosives that they might be hiding. So I said, "Okay, good to go." And they ordered me, "Hey, since this is your first mission outside the wire, stay in the Humvee, let the Marines do their job. When they've secured the area, you go in and then you search with Rex." I said, "Sounds easy, good to go." We get to the site. We're about 500 yards behind the house, and the staff sergeant that was leading the mission says, "Dog team, you come with us," meaning you come with us to raid the house. And which I had never done any kind of training of any kind for this. And I said, "Staff Sergeant, I was ordered to stay in the vehicle." He says, "I don't care what you ordered. I'm ordering you right now to come with us." I said, "Yes, Staff Sergeant." Just jumped right off that Humvee, and they took off, and there I was with the squad of Marines. And they said, "There goes the house," which, by the way, there was some barbed wire that they had set up. They were like, "Okay, we're going to cut this wire. You guys know what to do. You go here, here, and here. Be behind that house within less than 2 minutes. Ready, go." That was literally what happened. And so I grabbed the Marine next to me and said, "I have no idea what I'm doing." And he said, just stay on my back." So I said, "Good to go." and we're running through this palm grove. There's a grove of palm trees behind the house. And as we're running, I can't, which by the way, Rex is an aggressive dog, okay? He's not gonna unnecessarily bite people, but if you mess with him, he won't think twice about hurting you, okay? So I kept a mesh muzzle on him because I didn't want to risk Rex barking and giving away our position. I did not know how he was going to on our very first mission. I had no idea. So I wanted to take every precaution, and I kept a muzzle on him to keep his mouth shut at all times until I wanted to take it off. So as we're running, I couldn't help feel him pulling on my leash to the side the entire time. And I'm like, why does he keep doing this? Why does he keep doing this? And then I look to my left, and I see these flashes of light reflecting back at me. And there was a pack of stray dogs that was in this palm grove, and the moonlight was shining out of all their eyes. And they saw Rex, which is very bad because Rex is an animal in their domain. So to the other Marines, this is the danger that only a dog handler recognizes. The other Marines could care less. They have no idea that that's even going on. This is a big deal because I got to get Rex's attention and keep him focused. Which, by the way, at this point, he's trying to scratch off his muzzle now. It's because he wants to bark at them and square up on them and be the alpha dog. And well, the danger is, one, he's slowing us up. Two, if he were to interact with these dogs have diseases and rabies, and I can't let my dog come in contact with them. So I was going to pick up a rock and throw it at the dogs because they're starting to get bold and starting to get close. And I decided not to do that because the other Marines didn't know what I was doing, and if they heard a loud noise, they would stop them completely to check it out. So I'm just making sure to keep my dog safe and trying to get between him and the dogs as we run. Finally, I take the muzzle off of him because it was just slowing us up too much. He was about to bark, and I literally I slapped him as hard as I could. I didn't want to hurt him. I just wanted to get his attention, and I said, quiet. Just stay quiet. We actually train Rex to be quiet by just giving hand commands. The great thing about these dogs is they don't just operate off of voice commands, they operate off hand signals as well. And I was just like, quiet, quiet, quiet. And he understood. And he was quiet, but he kept checking over his shoulder. I finally grabbed the Marine and I said, get these freaking dogs away from us, which he did. And now we're about 50 yards behind the house. The insurgents set up concertina wire, which is that razor wire, circular. It was stacked about waist high. Again, this is nothing new to those Marines. They just decompressed it with their rifles, jumped right on over. Well, now I got to get Rex over this thing. Thankfully, this is where training kicks in. We had a 6-foot wall that we trained our dogs to jump over. Rex wasn't good at jumping over it, so he figured out, well, if he gets his 2 paws on top of the wall, he can pull himself over. So that's good. But the other thing was I wanted to help him. So whenever he jumped over the wall, I would stick my knee out and to give him that extra boost, and he'd run up, jump off my leg, and be able to clear it better. So when we got to this wire, that's exactly what we did. Even though he couldn't pull himself over, I stuck my knee out. He jumped over, ran, jumped off my leg to jump over the wire, although he didn't get all his momentum behind him. So I threw my arms underneath him, landed, kind of shredded my arms a little bit, but the other Marine grabbed him by the collar, pulled him over, and he was over safely. During the raid, an insurgent jumps out of the window and starts running down the street, but he has no weapon, and that's very clear. These dogs just aren't trained to detect, they're also trained to what we call apprehend. And the insurgent's running down the street, and I turn to the Marine and I say, hey, can I send my dog? He says, heck yes. So I get Rex riled up, which isn't hard, and he takes off running down into the night after this guy. Well, the guy turned out to be like a 12-year-old kid running, and he ran underneath a street light, and I saw that he was a kid as he was running. Again, these dogs are so intelligent and so well trained. Rex was halfway into getting this kid, but I didn't want that on my conscience. I did not want my dog tearing an potentially innocent kid to pieces, because Rex would have mauled this kid. So I called him off, and he did. He called off. I said, Rex, out, as loud as I could. And he stopped his pursuit. He did not attack the kid. The kid took off down the street, had no idea what was about to happen to him. I called Rex back to me. He comes back to heel. The Marines raided the house. They secured the building. I went in. Rex found a bunch of weapons that they had hiding beneath the floorboard in the closet. And then that was about it. And then we came home. That was our very first mission. And I was so incredibly proud of Rex because of how he performed, how he handled himself. And it just goes to show that regardless if you go through all the training or don't go through all the training, dogs understand. They know that they can sense the heightened awareness and stress going on around them. So that was Rex. And we went on to do many more missions. And on the left is a typical IED that we would find. It was usually operated by a telephone. They would take the battery off and put it to a motorcycle battery, take the wires out, connect the wires to the detonator and to the explosives, and then they would bury that whole thing. And then they would watch us, and then once we get close enough, they would just dial that phone number on that cell phone, which would trigger the entire thing. Rex found several of those IEDs. On the right is a cache that Rex found. Up top, it was buried, half buried into the mud, covered by a cardboard flap, and then we ended up finding all these other weapons that were in the bushes surrounding. Those are all Rex's trophies right there, and I would give him a nice big steak when he found those things afterward. These are some more caches that Rex found, RPGs top left. Up in the top right, you see those spools, the red wire there, the pink wire. That's what you call det cord. If you light that on fire, anyone within 50 feet of that thing would be dead. That is explosive wire right there, and it was buried in those sandbags, in those white sandbags, which was buried between two palm trees, and Rex found those. A couple more caches, big ones that he located. These are our dog teams in Fallujah, June 2004. Some of those are actually Air Force dog teams. So the Marines, out of all 4 branches, we have the fewest dog teams. Air Force has the most dog teams. And the Marine Corps called the Air Force and said, hey, can you loan us some of your dog teams since you have so many, which they did, to give us some more extra support. That's actually my favorite picture that we took right there. Rex went on to do 10 years of service in the Marine Corps. The average military working dog does about 7 years of service. Rex did 10. I was one of several handlers that handled Rex because I was active duty from 2001 to 2005. And when I got out, I had to give, Rex was still in his prime. So I had to give him up to another handler, which was incredibly hard to do, but I kept track. I actually went to go visit Rex all the time throughout his career. He went on 3 combat tours, all to Iraq, all to Fallujah or Ramadi. He found on all 3 tours a combined of hundreds of IEDs and weapons caches. On his 3rd and last tour, he found an IED, but it detonated literally underneath him and the handler and threw them about 15 feet. Thankfully, the ground was buried so deep in the ground that the ground took most of the force. They were both wounded, but they fully recovered, and Rex went back to work. He never deployed again after that, but he continued to do missions throughout the U.S. He did presidential missions protecting both President Bush and President Obama, and a lot of dignitaries throughout his career. He retired. He got adopted out. I wanted to adopt him, but so did the other handler that got wounded with him, and I didn't want to keep a handler from their dog that they were wounded with, so it was a girl, she adopted him, and he got to live the good life for about a little over a year, and then he passed away from complications that he had. So Sergeant Rex honors him. I'm glad that people can learn about his great accomplishments. He's one of many dogs that have done exemplary work in both the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. I would encourage you all to learn more about the dog teams. And I also want to announce we're really proud that last week on October 20, I think it was last week, October 28th, at Lackland Air Force Base, the National Military Working Dog Teams Monument was dedicated to honor all war dog teams from all the conflicts previous and all the dog teams still serving today. It's the first monument dedicated to an animal on a national status. So there's actually war dog monuments in different parts of the country that are local, regional monuments. This is a national Congress-approved, authorized monument. It has the same stature and prestige as like the Lincoln Memorial and the Washington Monument. And it's at Lackland Air Force Base because that is where the headquarters for all canines in the military and Department of Defense is located. I was honored to speak as part of that ceremony. If you ever want to go visit it, Lackland is in San Antonio, Texas. I would encourage you to go down there. You could also look it up online. Just search Military Working Dog Team's National Monument. If you want to help with the upkeep, there's a nonprofit set up to help clean and keep it and looking good, so you can donate money to it as well. I was really proud to serve as a handler. I hope you guys got value out of and learned something today about the dog teams. Dogs are still around the world today doing great things, which, by the way, out of those 12 dog teams that I deployed with, every single one of those dog teams did such phenomenal work. All of us sent in after-action reports saying, we wish we had this kind of training, we wish we had this kind of gear. You guys need to do this for the future dog teams. And as a result, the canine program in the military expanded tenfold. I mean, they put so much money into the dog program, it was ridiculous. Here goes some quotes about dog teams from some very famous generals. The third one down is my favorite, by General David Petraeus. He said, "The capability military working dogs bring to the fight cannot be replicated by man or machine. By all measures of performance, their yield outperforms any asset we have in our inventory. Our Army and military would be remiss if we failed to invest more in this incredibly valuable resource." So the military created an entire unit called JIDO, which is Joint IED Defeat Organization is what it's called. The entire unit was set up to figure out how to defeat IEDs and explosives. They spent, I think it was $6 billion or $2 billion. It was multiple billions, that's all I know, over the course of 6 years to create technology and training to counter IEDs. And at the end of all that spending, they came to the realization that the best thing out there were dogs. But that's not to say that a lot of that money went to good use. They actually did create a lot of great technology and programs that did help. But overall, the dog's nose was still the best at detecting IEDs. That's how valuable they've been. So I hope you guys enjoyed our story a little bit. I'm really honored to be here. I'll open it up to a couple of Q&A. Is that all right, Jim? So does anyone have any questions about dog, our service, or the canine program in general? Yes, sir, Logan.
So the military dogs, when they're trained I can shout. Are the dogs trained specifically for a specific category, or are they trained to smell all sorts of things? Like, this dog's only trained to smell explosives, this one's only trained to smell narcotics, or are they given the whole gambit?
So most of the dogs are dual certified, meaning they're certified in both apprehension and in patrol work, which means they can attack you if we want them to. That's called patrol. They need to get certified in that. And they're also certified in detection. Now, when it comes to detection, they're only certified in either explosives or narcotics, but not both. You never want to do both, because if they respond, well, do you call the bomb squad or do you call the narc squad? You know what I mean? And it's usually a passive response, which means the dog will literally get as close as possible to the odor. And once they feel that they got as close as they can possibly get without touching it, they'll sit and then they'll look at you and say, "Give me my reward." Yes, sir.
Your initial training as an MP dog handler, was that just for patrol on the bases, stateside, things like that?
Yes, sir. So every single dog handler in the military trains at Lackland Air Force Base. And we train together. Usually in each class, there's about 15 handlers in each class, which is comprised of all 4 branches of service. And we're all trained to learn how to handle a dog. What's great about it's a 3-month training course, the best training school I've ever been in, where you learn the basics of handling a dog, how to operate a dog in a detection area, how to send it on somebody, how to operate the dog if an attack if a suspect were to run away, things like that. So you learn the basics of handling. When you get stationed to your permanent duty station, so mine was Camp Pendleton, that's where the real fun begins. That's where you learn from the experienced handlers, and they take you as a basic handler and they train you to maximize your skill level. It's the same thing with the dogs. When the dogs get certified and they get stationed at whatever base that they're going to work out of, they are fundamentally trained in patrol work and detection work. It's our job as a handler and together as a canine unit to maximize that dog's potential. And Rex, the reason why we got selected to go to Iraq was because Rex was we were a great dog team together, okay? And what the great thing about Camp Pendleton is it's such a huge base and we can train anywhere. So there's this huge warehouse at Camp Pendleton that we use for detection problems all the time. And the average dog in the unit, it took them about 45 minutes to successfully clear that warehouse of all the training aids. It took Rex 25 minutes or less every single time. And we have, there's no way you can shortchange it either. There's always a chief trainer that observes every single dog team, and if you miss a place, they make you go back or anything like that. Rex always did it in almost half the time than all the dogs. That's how good he was. He was such a great, he was just great dog. Yes, sir? Yes. Again, dogs have personalities just like human beings. So, I mean, do human beings show a significant change when they come back? Yes, they do. It's just to what degree. As soon as you get exposed to combat stress, you automatically have combat stress. It's just to what degree and how you handle it. Dogs are the same way, and it's actually proven that dogs can get PTSD or PTS, I like just call it PTS. The military recognized this. There's a multi-million-dollar hospital just for the dogs at Lackland Air Force Base, so that if it's even suspected that the dogs are suffering from PTS, they immediately stop working, they get sent back to the hospital, they go through all this therapy and training, and if they successfully go through it, then they go back into working. If they don't, they get adopted out. We take great care of our dogs. Yes, sir?
Yes, excellent presentation. I just had a couple of short technical questions.
Sure.
On one of your slides, you mentioned that there was an evolution, a transition from teaching war dogs to what you call patrol dogs because they had more levels of aggression that could be controlled and so forth. I was a little curious about that. And the second thing, maybe related, is can you tell me if there were differences from a dog handler's point of view on those three types of breeds, besides the German Shepherd, which we learned a lot about, the two Belgian breeds in terms of training or behavior or anything like that? So two little questions.
Sure. So the evolution of training, when the military dog program stood up, they only trained the dogs to operate in combat operations. They worked hand in hand with the infantry, and they went through combat scenarios all the time. In the post-Vietnam era, that was the change in the military working dog program. They stopped sending dogs into training with infantry and into combat scenarios because there was no war going on at that time, but they still saw the value of the dogs. So they took that aggression that dogs had, and they just trained it in how to apprehend suspects and how to control it better so that they weren't such a liability back here in the States and just operating amongst civilians. Does that make sense? They just stopped that combat mindset in dog teams, and it was more just focus on controlling your dog's aggression so that they can operate here back in the States on base. In terms of the difference with the breeds, the German Shepherd, by far and away, in my personal opinion, which by the way, handlers love to disagree on which breeds are best. They'll say Sheptastic, meaning the Sheps are the best, and Maligators are, they have all these phrases and nicknames for them. In my personal opinion, Belgian Malinois are by far and away the most athletic dogs, working dogs that you can get. I've seen Belgian Malinois literally clear a 6-foot wall like it was nothing. I mean, like it was just a deer just prancing right over that thing. The majority of German Shepherds struggle just getting over the wall. However, German Shepherd is, in my opinion, more intelligent than the Belgian Malinois. They might not be, they're still athletic, they're great athletic dogs. They might not be at the same level as the Mal, but you'll see them working out the problem. A Malinois is just go, 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 and they'll destruct everything. If you have them as a pet, they're gonna tear your couches, they're gonna tear everything up. A shepherd won't. They're intelligent. They'll figure things out. And it's more of a thinking man's dog. Does that make sense? Whereas a Malinois is just, you know, a bulk of energy and mass and just goes through a brick wall.
Over here, Mike.
Yes, sir.
Dogs are territorial. And I just wondered, could you ever use 2 or 3 on the same mission, on the same, target, and will they respect one another?
Yes and no. So we will use multiple dogs depending on the size of the operation, but we don't let the dogs interact. You know, Rex is an alpha dog. So as soon as he interacts with another dog, he wants to establish his dominance. You know, it's okay that he's aggressive and he's dominant because you can channel that energy into working, into what you want to do. And actually, Rex made me earn his respect. The very first time I went into Rex's kennel at Camp Pendleton, I just wanted, you know, because as a handler, when you get assigned a dog, you don't just go into their kennel and take them out and start working and training. You need to earn that dog's trust and respect before you can start giving that dog commands. And that process can take a week, a month, a couple months, however long it takes. And so when I went in to take Rex out, I just wanted to take him out and take him into the yard and whatnot and be around him. And I put the collar around him. He bit me. He just attacked me for even daring to touch him. Well, as a handler, you can't do, which by the way, if you want to become a handler, it's not if, it's when you're going to get bit. You are guaranteed to get bit at some point in your career. I've been bit my entire body. I've been bit everywhere during training. So Rex latched onto my hand and was tearing my arm apart, and I couldn't let him do that because I would never have his respect ever if I allowed him to get away with it. So I did what's called an alpha roll, which is where I grabbed him around the throat, put him on his back, and I mounted myself on top of him so that he couldn't move, which, by the way, he's going berserk. I took the leash, wrapped it around his mouth to close his mouth, kept it nice and close, and just looked straight in his face. And I wasn't hurting him, punching him. I was just kind of slapping him across the snout, saying, no, 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 out, out, out. Sat there for about a good 2 minutes just staring at his eyes, let him back up, he bit me again. Right? I had to do it 2 or 3 times. And then he finally realized, okay, I got it. You're the alpha. And he was fiercely protective of me from that day on. Never even attempted to try and bite me ever again. So when we were out in the field, usually it's just 1 dog team per squad or you know, a couple squads. But if it's a big enough operation, for example, the Army unit that was next to us, they had a huge grid that they wanted to clear. And so we used multiple dog teams, but we didn't ever let the dogs interact, unless it was a female dog. Rex loved female dogs. Yeah, so I let him interact with them.
Mike, we got a dog waiting off stage.
Yes,
So
let's bring him out.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much for
All
your
right.
presentation. Let's
Thanks
give
so much,
Mike
everybody.
a big thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Where's he at? Is he over here?
Yeah, he's out.